Your diet soft drink might be triggering the exact same metabolic response as regular sugar, and the food industry has known this for 15 years. Here's what they didn't want you to see in this research. Welcome back. In part 1 we covered the sweetener landscape and the plant-based options that are holding up reasonably well under scientific scrutiny: stevia, monk fruit and allulose. If you haven't listened to that one, go back and start there. Today we're getting into complicated stuff. Artificial sweeteners have been in our food supply for decades. Sugar alcohols are in virtually every keto-friendly and sugar-free product on the shelf. And now we're going to talk about some research from the last 2 to 3 years that frankly should change how you read a food label. Artificial sweeteners have been the go-to for anyone managing weight or diabetes since the 1950s. The pitch was simple: all the sweetness, none of the calories, none of the blood sugar spike. For decades, that seemed like a good deal. The main ones you'll encounter are sucralose, that's Splenda, aspartame, which is in equal and a huge number of diet drinks, and saccharin, the oldest of the lot, which is sweet and low. They're all FDA approved. They've all been through an extensive safety review, and I want to be clear about that because a lot of the discourse around these sweeteners veers into territory that isn't well supported by the evidence. Saccharin had a cancer scare in the 1970s based on rat studies that used doses equivalent to a human drinking hundreds of cans of diet drink a day. That warning was removed in 2000. Aspartame was classified as possibly carcinogenic by the WHO's IARC group in 2023, but that classification puts it in the same category as pickled vegetables and working as a hairdresser. The FDA reviewed the same studies and explicitly disagreed with that assessment. So let's not be hysterical about these, but let's also be honest about the emerging questions. Aspartame is the most consumed artificial sweetener on the planet. It's in Diet Coke, in chewing gum, in countless protein supplements and sugar-free products. The cancer question, as I've said, is not well supported at normal intake levels. The concerns I find more credible are around 2 other areas. First, cardiovascular associations. Some large cohort studies have found associations between high artificial sweetener consumption and cardiovascular events, including stroke. These are observational studies, so they do not prove cause and effect, but the signal is consistent enough that it warrants attention. Second, gut microbiome disruption. A 2025 review of human intervention studies found that sucralose and saccharin in particular may disrupt glucose tolerance in certain individuals, and the effect appears to be mediated through changes in gut microbiome. Aspartame has also been flagged in similar research. The individual response is highly variable. Some people seem more susceptible than others, but the mechanism is plausible and the evidence is accumulating. The bottom line on aspartame and sucralose for me clinically is this: moderate use in a healthy adult is probably fine. But if you're consuming these in large quantities every day, multiple diet drinks, sugar-free protein bars, artificial sweetener in every coffee, that's not zero risk, and you should know that. Sucralose deserves its own mention in one specific point that doesn't get enough attention. Sucralose is heat stable, which is why it's popular in baking. That's actually the problem. When sucralose is heated to high temperatures, such as baking or frying, it can form compounds called chloropropanols, some of which have been flagged as potentially harmful. This is an area where the research is still developing, but it's enough for me to suggest if you're using sucralose, use it in cold applications only. Coffee, smoothies, cold drinks. Don't bake with it. Erythritol. This is the one I want you to pay the most attention to, because erythritol is everywhere and most people have no idea they're consuming it. Erythritol is a sugar alcohol. It's about 70% as sweet as table sugar, has nearly 0 calories and doesn't raise blood glucose. On paper, it looked like a winner. It became the go-to bulking agent in almost every stevia, monk fruit and keto branded product on the market. If your sweetener comes in a packet or a bag, there's a good chance it contains erythritol. Now here's where the story changes. In February 2023, a study published in Nature Medicine found that higher blood levels of erythritol were associated with a significantly increased risk of heart attack and stroke in cardiac patients. Patients in the highest quartile of erythritol levels were roughly twice as likely to have a major cardiac event over a 3-year follow-up compared to those in the lowest quartile. Then, in 2024, the same research group, led by Dr. Stanley Hazen at the Cleveland Clinic, published a follow-up human trial showing that consuming a single erythritol-sweetened drink caused blood erythritol levels to spike more than 1,000 times above baseline. That spike was directly associated with increased platelet activity, meaning the blood became measurably more prone to clotting. Now, important caveats. The initial study was observational in a high-risk population, cardiac patients. The platelet study was small. Some researchers have noted that the body also produces erythritol endogenously, and that elevated plasma levels may reflect underlying metabolic dysfunction rather than dietary intake. These are legitimate scientific debates, and the research is ongoing. But here is my clinical position. Given that erythritol is in almost every healthy sweetener product at significant doses, and given that the mechanism, platelet activation, thrombosis risk, is biologically plausible, I think the precautionary principle applies, particularly for anyone with cardiovascular risk factors. Keep your erythritol intake low. If you're choosing a stevia or monk fruit product, look for one bulked with allulose rather than erythritol. The label matters. Briefly, xylitol, another sugar alcohol commonly found in dental products and some sugar-free foods, has been flagged in the same research program. A 2024 study in the European Heart Journal found associations between higher xylitol levels and increased cardiovascular risk using mechanisms similar to those in the erythritol findings. This is emerging research, not settled science, but once again, the pattern is worth noting. For toothpaste quantities, not a concern. For xylitol as a daily cooking sweetener or food ingredient at gram-level doses, it's worth being cautious. One more thread to pull on because it connects a lot of what we talk about on MedHeads. A growing body of evidence suggests that several non-nutritive sweeteners, particularly sucralose, saccharin, and aspartame, may alter the composition of the gut microbiome, thereby impairing glucose tolerance. Essentially, you're avoiding a blood sugar spike from the sweetener itself, but you may be triggering metabolic disruption via a gut-mediated pathway. The irony is sharp. Sweeteners used to manage blood sugar may, in some people, worsen blood sugar control. Stevia is the notable exception here. A 2024 study found that 12 weeks of stevia consumption did not alter gut microbiome composition. That's another mark in stevia's favor. Let me give you something concrete to leave with. If you want to reduce sugar, here's my current thinking based on the available evidence. Stevia and monk fruit, particularly in pure forms or blended with allulose, are your best and safest options. They have the strongest safety records, the least microbiome impact, and no emerging cardiovascular signals. Allulose, probably the best overall substitute if you're cooking or baking. Emerging metabolic benefits are encouraging. Erythritol and xylitol use sparingly. Be aware they're in more products than you think. If you have cardiovascular risk factors, I would prioritize alternatives. Sucralose and aspartame, fine in moderation, but don't treat them as consequence-free. Be mindful of quantities, avoid heating sucralose, and watch the microbiome research as it develops. And the bottom line across all of this, no sweetener, natural or artificial, is a health food. The goal isn't to find a perfect sugar replacement and use it freely. The goal should be to gradually reduce the expectation that everything needs to be sweet. That's where the real metabolic benefit lives. I'm Dr. Fergal Armstrong, and this is MedHeads. Thanks for listening to both parts of this series. Share it with someone who's standing in the sweetener aisle wondering what on earth to buy.